So obviously this is me. This is me and my two kids, and this is us now. But let me tell you a little bit about who then Staff Sergeant Michelle Humphrey was back in about 2009, 2010. So my story starts off just like any other love story does, right? Boy meets girl, girl falls for boy. You think it's going to be this big fairy tale relationship. Everything's going to be great. Well, in my case, I PCS'd in Langley. I had met my boyfriend, and everything seemed wonderful. Of course, he was charming, he was attentive, he complimented me. He always wanted to be around me, made me feel really good about myself. He'd start with the comments like, "Oh, you look so pretty without makeup. You shouldn't wear makeup. You don't need it." So I'm like, "Oh, makes me feel good, right?" Or things like, "Why do you go to the gym so much? You don't need to go to the gym. Your body's perfect." So in the beginning of the relationship, that was great because I was like, "Oh, he loves me for who I am." But then as time went on, more controlling behavior started to come out about, like, if I was talking to a male coworker, or he wanted to control my time with my phone. He wanted to see what was going on in my phone, things of that nature. And then this is back when, social media started being really big, and so Facebook, right? So he wanted in my Facebook accounts and to see what I was doing. But so the day came, obviously, that I didn't comply. And that was the first day that he actually hit me. And I will not forget that because it was at the top of the stairs, and I remember trying to convince myself that what just happened hadn't happened, that I wasn't that person that was in an abusive relationship. I wasn't that person that allowed a man to hit me or be controlled. So it was easier for me just to kind of convince myself that it really wasn't as bad as what it was. But as time went on, things just progressively got worse to the point that I was scared to talk to any other male. I had isolated myself so much from my family because I didn't want family and friends because I didn't want them to figure out what was going on in my life. I was just walking on eggshells hoping every single day that I could get through that day without fighting and without something happening. This was started 2009, ended up in the hospital in February. I had left kidney failure, and I'm convinced to this day because they never found a source for what caused it all. I think my body was just stressed, and it started shutting down. I ended up in the hospital for about 2 months from that stint, and when I got out of the hospital, I was out for about a month, and then a month later I found out I was pregnant. My son. So obviously, just like anybody else, you hope that things will get better. Maybe he'll stop hitting you. Maybe he'll stop beating me at this point because I'm carrying his child. But that is not what happened. So in June, I was about 4 months pregnant this time, and we ended up breaking up. I broke up with him, and I was trying to move on with my life, me and my daughter. And I was preparing myself to be a single parent of 2 children as a staff sergeant, trying to figure out how to make it, right? So obviously we had broke up. He was about to deploy. I'm thinking, okay, things are going to get better. But I will never forget, it was June 9th, 2010. I was sitting at my house watching the Lakers and the Celtics play in the NBA playoffs. I just put my daughter to bed, and I was sitting on the couch watching the game, and I had my laptop up, on Facebook, just doing random stuff. And I thought I had heard like something, y'all know garage doors, how they have like that little metal thing where if you turn it, it starts like creaking, that sound. Well, I'd heard that, but I didn't want to pay attention to it. I had recently just bought this house and moved into it, so I was thinking I was just getting used to the sounds of the new house. So I just kind of let it go and blew it off. A few minutes later, I heard what sounded like the rattling of a doorknob, and it was actually in my kitchen. Again, I ignored it because I didn't really think that it was anything, and I didn't want it to be anything, really. And then a few minutes later, I got the sense that somebody was looking at me. So I looked over, and I had this bay window right to my right, and there stood my ex standing right there in the bushes. So I went over to the front door, and he came over. I could see him moving over to the door to meet me. And my intent was just to ask him what he was doing there. I should have called the cops. I know what y'all are thinking. It's like when you're watching a scary movie and you're like, don't go in the house or don't follow this person. You have every thought of what you should be doing when you watch it until you're actually living it and going through it. So I went to the door and I asked him what he was doing there. And he said he was just there to talk to me. And he wanted to talk to me about the baby and what we're going to do about my son. And so he asked if he could come in for a little bit. And after a few minutes, I finally let him in. So we go back in, I'm sitting on the couch, and he goes to sit in the chair. Meanwhile, my laptop is sitting on the coffee table in front of me. And we're going back and forth talking about stuff, and the conversation starts to get heated, and I can tell that it's not going in a good direction whatsoever. So I'm like, hey, I think it's time for you to go. And so as he stands up to go, he turns around, and he looks, and he's like, I was watching you through the window on your laptop. Who the hell were you talking to? And so it was like in that instant, I knew, like my stomach dropped to my feet, and I knew stuff was about to get real. I looked down at my laptop as he was looking at it, and he grabbed it off the coffee table and ran out my front door with my laptop. So again, you do what you think you would do, right? Call the cops, right? No. I go out the door after him for my laptop. And it wasn't so much because I wanted the laptop, it was because in my mind, I didn't want him controlling me anymore. I didn't want him to have control over anything in my life anymore. So I went after him to grab my laptop and honestly chased him around my house a couple times, as silly as it sounds, to try to get it, until I finally stopped. And we stopped by where he had parked his car, which actually was strategically parked down the street, so I would have never saw it had I not seen him in the bushes, and I have no idea how long he was standing there watching me before I figured out it was there. But so he opens the car door and he tries to he does throw my laptop into the passenger seat. And I lunge for it to try to grab it from him, and that is the first time that he punched me in the face, and I fell to the ground. I scraped my arm on the curb real bad, and I got up and I hit him back. And I know it wasn't right. It's not something I'm proud of. It's the first time I've ever hit anybody, but I punched him back. And then he just looks at me, he's like, you stupid bitch. And I knew again that was not the right decision to make, but he hit me on the sides of my head right here, boxed me a couple times, probably about 5-6 times, until I collapsed to the ground. And so I found out later I had a concussion from those blows. But before I had went out the house, I had grabbed my cell phone off the couch to go with me. And so he jumps in the driver's side to drive off, but I stand back up, and I'm trying to get into my cell phone to be able to call 911, but he sees the phone. You all remember the sidekick phones where you had to pop the phone open and the light come on or whatever? So he had saw the light pop on my phone, and he had stopped the car in motion and jumped back out of the car and grabbed my phone and threw it in the street, and it shattered everywhere. And we began to struggle again, and he had grabbed me by the back of my hair and dragged me completely across my yard back into my house, all the way through my house. Into the kitchen, and he had gotten a knife from the dish drain and gotten over top of me, and at this point he was trying to slit my throat, and I was begging for my life and for my unborn child and for my daughter who was in the house at the time because she was asleep. Like I said, I had put her to sleep. So we struggled for a long time, and he just kept telling me to stop begging him. It was pathetic. Just to be quiet. So finally, after a couple minutes of struggling, he finally stopped. He got off top of me and pulled me up and led me back into the living room and made me sit down on the love seat So I remember sitting there, and just to try to give you all a picture, so I'm sitting on the left seat, and beside me is my not nightstand, end table. And home phone is on there. Mind you, my cell phone's already broken out in the street. So my home phone's over here. He's standing in front of me, and he turns the knife to me. This is a kitchen knife. And he turns the handle to me, and he was like, "You need to take this. You're going to need it." I was like, "I don't need it. Let's just calm down, calm down." And he was like, "Hand me the phone. Hand me the house phone." So I reach over to grab the cordless, and I hand it to him, and he takes it and he puts it in his pocket. And it's like, because he has these pajama pants on that were like real baggy. And so he slides the phone down in his pocket. And when he slides his hand down, he pulls back out one of those Gerber switchblade knives. And so I have my knife and he has his now. And so then he asked me where the other phone in the house was, because it was one of those cordless that had two connected to the base, and the other one was in the bedroom. So I was like, it's in the back bedroom. So he tells me to go up to go get it, and I get to where I stand up and I'm passing him to go, and he sticks the knife right in my side. And he was like, "Don't scream, I'll kill you. If you run, I will kill you. Don't say a word." And I remember just asking him if I could check on my daughter, because I wanted to make sure she hadn't woke up, because I didn't want her to walk out and see what was going on. So I went back there, and I was able to peep in on her room, and she was still there sleeping. Then I walked back to the bedroom, and I grabbed the phone, and he put the phone in his hand, his other hand. And then, remember I said that we were outside, so he had left his car in the middle of the street. So as we're walking back down the hallway to go into the living room, he's like, "Come outside with me. I have to move the car." And because I remember distinctly, as we're going closer towards the front door, hearing the car keys in the ignition. You know how like when you leave the door open in some like older cars or whatever, I don't know if it does it really anymore, but how the keys are in the ignition, it's just binging because the door's open. I remember hearing that distinctly as I'm walking back outside. And he tells me to stand on the sidewalk, and I remember pacing and him telling me to stop pacing because I was making him nervous. And so just to stand there and not to scream. He's going to kill me. If I scream, if I run, he's going to kill me. And honestly, in that point, I know most of y'all are thinking, why didn't you run? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you do something? My daughter was in the house. In that moment, it was more of trying to protect my unborn child and my daughter that was in the house versus trying to just run. And it was the only rational thought that I had. So I stood there and stood on the sidewalk. And when we went back outside, he threw the other cordless phone out in the street and left the other phone in the car when he parked. So he grabbed my laptop back out of the passenger seat and left the home phone in the car. And we went back inside. And then that's when we went through about 7 hours of hell, what I call it, where he brought my laptop in and he went through my emails. He went through my Facebook. He went through every single thing that he could find in that computer. Pictures, messages I had forgotten about that I even had in there. Asking me about who this person was, swearing I slept with them, what was the backstory for it. And if he had to, the stipulation was if he had to ask me more than 3 times, he was either going to hit me or he was going to cut me. And he did. Every single time that I couldn't recollect something. I remember I had peed myself because I was so scared. I couldn't hold it anymore. I was absolutely terrified. He had choked me. You'll see the pictures here in a little bit. But so we went through all this. And then finally the sun came up. And I was like, I need to get my daughter out of here. I need to get her to school. This was during the weekday, so I still had to go to work the next day. And so trying to convince him to let me out of the house to be able to get her to school was a challenge, but he finally agreed. But the thing that he said is I will let you leave, but you need to go to work, submit leave, tell him you're not feeling well with the pregnancy, and then you're coming back here and you're getting an abortion. So the whole premise for that whole night was he was trying to either have me have a spontaneous abortion or beat my child out of me or something because he didn't want to be with somebody he wasn't going to raise a child with, or he didn't want a baby with somebody he wasn't going to raise a child with. So finally, I got out of that situation. I got out of the house, and again, I know y'all are thinking, why didn't you go to the cops at this point? I didn't. I went and took my daughter to school. I went in there and I didn't know what I looked like. I was in so much shock. But he had gotten a hold of me so bad. I had 2 black eyes. This tooth is broken. It was broken. It's fake. This bottom one is fake. It's been replaced now, obviously. Fractured jaw, ruptured eardrum, and concussion. Multiple bruises all over my body and the side of my head, and a couple cut marks on my legs from where he had cut me from the knives. I remember going to the school and dropping off my daughter and taking him off of the list to be able to pick her up. And then looking at me like like they know something's wrong, right? Something's not right. But none of them said anything to me. I just took him off the list, and they said, okay. I was like, don't let him pick her up today. If he comes here, call me. No, I didn't have a phone. I'm like, call me. So I left, and I drove back through the gate to go to work. Handed my ID card to the gate guard, looking like I did. And he said, have a nice day. Didn't even ask, didn't even think twice about it. It wasn't until I got to work that I got there and I broke down. I was like, I really need help. And so my supervisor took me over to the first sergeant and to the chief and everything, and they got me over to the emergency room, because they had an emergency room on base, and they started the whole process of the pictures, PA coming, OSI coming, off base coming, because the incident was off base. And I'll never forget hearing my child's heartbeat to make sure that he was still alive from that. And knowing that he survived that was huge. So we went through that whole process that day, and they had put out a bolo for him, and they found him finally. He was in my work parking lot waiting for me to come down. And he had been waiting there for a while. I come to find out later on, I guess he had walked into work looking for me and didn't speak to anybody. He just was looking for me. But they found him sitting out in the car. And then they apprehended him, and he went into pretrial confinement and was held, he was held downtown for about 3 weeks. And then he went into pretrial confinement before the court date. He ended up pleading guilty to all the charges. Though he had 2 felony counts, because he had cut me with 2 different blades for the striking me, the communicating the threat. And I think the hardest part for me during all this was when I had convinced myself so much through counseling that I was mandated to go into through mental health, was that maybe he just didn't do this, maybe he snapped, maybe something had happened to him that triggered him. But no, when he went in to plead, the judge asked him do you know what you're pleading guilty to? Do you know what you did? And he's like, yes. And he's like, did you tell her you were going to kill her? And he's like, yes. And the judge was like, did you mean it? He's like, I meant every word of it. So for me that was huge, because I, again, was trying to minimize the situation the whole time throughout this whole process, which a lot of victims do. They try to make it less or minimize the whole thing that happened to him. So, but after court, he ended up pleading guilty, like I said, and got 3 years confinement for that. And then my son was born 2 weeks later after we went to trial. So my son doesn't know his father. He's not on his birth certificate. He has no rights to my son. But I'll go ahead and show you the pictures. This was right after it happened. So clearly the bruises got much worse as days went on. But you can flip. Yeah, you can flip. So this was the back of my eardrum. It had swelled up all the way out here, and he had choked me to the point I passed out. And those fingerprints were still in my neck when we went to trial 4 months later. Those were the 2 knives that he had cut me with. I don't know if you can see this bruise right here. This is he was trying to punch my stomach. and I had lifted my leg up to block the shot going in. But obviously this is us now, and so we still have our challenges and everything, but honestly, the biggest thing that got me through this was my kids and my faith. And all these programs are here to help you. We got family advocacy, the chapel, all these resources that are available to us. I didn't come from an abusive family. I came from a broken home, but abuse wasn't something, you hear the stereotype, right? That a lot of people come from abuse and they see it and they go through it and they allow. I didn't come from that. And I'd heard all about the programs that were available to me and I knew about it. But kind of like what you saw in the movie is that you just try to be tough and get through it. You don't want it to be out there for people to know about. And domestic violence is such a silent crime. It's so private, it's so personal. That a lot of people don't talk about it, but we really need to start talking about it and start getting people the help that they need. So I just encourage you all, if you are going through it, or if you know somebody's going through it, you can point them in my direction. Any First Sergeant will help you. Family advocacy will help you. Anybody is willing to help you, but you got to be able to want to help yourself. And until you get to that point, a lot of times you just need that person that's there to encourage you and show you that you love them, and they'll get through it. But that's my story.